Man, I love Zelda. I love the characters, I love the exploration, I love finding and using a ton of crazy items. I love the dungeons, and I love the bosses. Sometimes. I wish I loved more of the bosses, but I think there's a problem that keeps cropping up with the way The Legend of Zelda designs boss fights. Most of the games have at least one or two standout, no qualifiers, great bosses. But other bosses in the same games fall far too often into a pattern. A dull, predictable, uninspired pattern. The Zelda pattern. Let's talk about Zelda boss design, the pattern the games have kept falling into, and what other games have done to break out of it, even if only for a moment. I know I'm trapped in a pattern of sponsorships. Do you know what today's episode sponsor is? Wrong. Or right, maybe. I can't hear you through the screen. It's Audible. My book club is still rolling, and we decided to read Dune. Yeah, it's not new, but it's a sci-fi classic for a reason. I listen while working out, and I've found it a million times easier to fit an audiobook into my schedule than reading a physical copy. And Audible lets you select from a huge catalog. Classics, new releases, obscure titles, and bestsellers. If you sign up now, you get full access to the all-new Plus catalog, with thousands of select audiobooks, podcasts, Audible originals, fitness and guided meditation programs, sleep tracks, and more, included with your membership. Go to audible.com/designdoc or text DesignDoc to 500-500 to get one free audiobook, a 30-day free trial, and explore their Plus catalog. Click the link in the description to sign up and get literate as hell, the easy way, with Audible. Now, I'm calling it the Zelda pattern, but it doesn't describe every Zelda boss, and it's a pattern that other games fall into also. It just seems to happen in tons of Zelda games, especially the ones made after the jump to 3D, from Ocarina of Time onwards. What I'm calling the Zelda pattern is made up of 3 parts. 1. Right before or during the dungeon, you get some key item, and the boss acts as the item's final test. 2. There's a single-mindedness to the fight. There's barely anything else to do besides the main goal. 3. Earlier in the game, you've already fought a boss that did parts 1 and 2. Each part by itself isn't a big deal, but when combined in the same fight, the parts work together to drag down the design. When you start looking for it, it's amazing how many Zelda bosses fall into the pattern. Look at Ocarina of Time. First dungeon, the Deku Tree. You get the slingshot, use it for a few puzzles, and you reach the first boss, Queen Goma. To win, you use the slingshot to knock her off the ceiling or while she's on the ground, and then swipe your sword to damage her health. Fine, simple, no problems. A perfectly good early tutorial boss. On to Dodongo's Cavern. Hey, you just got the bomb bag. Blow up some rocks and a few simple puzzles, and you reach the boss, King Dodongo. Throw bombs into his mouth while he's charging up to stun him. Swipe down, and repeat the cycle. This feels a lot like Goma, but with bombs. But those are just the first 2 bosses, right? They're supposed to be easy and straightforward. How about the Spirit Temple? Hey, you just got the Mirror Shield. Reflect some beams of light in a few simple puzzles, and you reach the boss, Twinrova. In Phase 1, you reflect beams of fire and ice back towards the witches. In Phase 2, you absorb, then reflect 3 attacks with the Mirror Shield. Whenever they're ready. Come on. There it is. And then swipe left. There's no twist, no mystery, and not really any challenge. Generous timing windows, not much to distract you or watch out for. There's no other moves. Maybe you have to sidestep something a couple of times and position yourself, but there's really nothing else going on. There's just the wait and the one weird trick with each dungeon item to defeat each boss. It's not just Ocarina either. What about Wind Waker? Oh no. Yeah, it's here too. The Dragon Roost Cavern drops off a grappling hook, which you use to swing around the place on specific grapple points. The boss is... Wait, it's Goma again. Is that Goma? Did she get a haircut? Says it's Goma. Use your one tool to grapple onto the dragon tail in the center of the room. Goma doesn't put up too much of a fuss as you do it. Do that 3 times, break her armor, grapple her in the eye, swipe, and you're done. The Forsaken Fortress. get Skull Hammer, hit Hammer on Bird, break Helmet, swipe swipe swipe, done. The Earth Temple, Mirror Shield, again. Shine a light on ghosts to make them less ghosty. Jalhalla is a big ghost, like a triple ghost. So shine the light, make less ghosty, throw at wall, make little ghosts, shine light again, repeat till done. The Wind Temple, Hookshot. Use Hookshot to complete your Sandworm oral surgery test. Done. What about Twilight Princess? Same issue. The very first dungeon, get the Gale Boomerang. Travel Boomerang Air to Diababa with a quick connection in Bomb Bug City. Repeat with moving targets. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Done. Goron Mines. Arrows and Iron Boots. Arrow Pointy. Arrow hit Glowy. Stun Boss. Boots Heavy. Grab chain while heavy boots chain no go up no more. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Done. You see the pattern by now. There's nothing inherently wrong with this design formula. It's not a bad way to teach and ensure that a player knows how to use a new item. The problem is the combination of the predictable singular focus and the repetition. Most of these fights revolve entirely and solely around using the one dungeon item to do the one thing to win. There's not that much concern about positioning or any other enemies to distract you. There aren't many hazards to avoid or even many combinations of items to use. The pattern is very single-minded. Seeing the same basic mechanical fight structure show up 3, 4, 5 times in a game really detracts from the whole slew of game bosses you get through. No matter how cool the setting is or how interesting the boss character design is, the more bosses that follow the pattern in a game, the more you notice it, and the more predictable the fights become, which compounds with the lack of engagement the fights have as they stand alone. So how do you fix it? How do you break out of the Zelda pattern? Luckily, snapping off any of the 3 legs will do the trick. Other games that borrow heavily from Zelda have had some success by just barely tweaking the pattern. The first Darksiders is essentially an Ocarina-style Zelda game with some light character action combat akin to the original God of War trilogy mixed in. Its dungeon designs are in the style of the classic 3D Zeldas. You find a key item partway through that becomes the central element to getting through the puzzles and enemies that lie beyond. The game's boss designs also largely follow the Zelda pattern, but with a couple of notable changes. The first dungeon is the Twilight Cathedral, which centers around the Crossblade. It locks onto multiple targets that the blade will bounce between, a lot like Zelda's Gale Boomerang. The Crossblade is often used in puzzles alongside these sticky bombs that you find scattered, which will blow up crystals when you light them by tagging a torch beforehand. The main boss is Tiamat, and is also designed in part as a final test for the Crossblade. Toss a nearby bomb onto her, then light the bombs as you had been doing earlier to blow them up, and bring her down to do some damage. It's pretty similar in design to the Diababa fight in Twilight Princess, but the minor tweaks make a big difference. Successfully using the dungeon item on Tiamat takes more effort than your average Zelda pattern boss. You have to aim carefully to stick the bomb on a spot that you will be able to lock onto later with the Crossblade. The opportunity window is much smaller too, and gets shorter on the second cycle. You have to watch out for a barrage of attacks and the crumbling environmental architecture which can get in the way of your perfect shot. The other tweak is in the second phase, which shifts the style to a more traditional character action combat encounter. You're dodging in and out of a variety of attacks and getting your hits in whenever you can. The Crossblade is helpful here too, but it's just another tool in your kit, and you can use whatever you find most convenient. It's still not crazy difficult, but it's not something you can sleepwalk your way through your first time. These small changes barely change the fight's fundamental design, but they make the combat feel more well-rounded, more challenging, and just more interesting. But even Zelda didn't always lean so heavily on the Zelda pattern. Many of the bosses from the old games were very sword-oriented, which was a little samey in its own way, but not quite as scripted. A Link to the Past did start to plant the seeds of the one main item dungeon idea, but it wasn't quite so rigid either. Some bosses would have you use the item to expose a weakness, but it wasn't yet the norm. For some, the key item was an optional approach like in the boss of the Dark Palace. You get a magic hammer during this dungeon, which you could use to smash that helmet, but you could just use bombs too. The fights treated the weapons more like suggested tools, rather than the key to open the next scripted sequence. By the time the series gets to the Minish Cap, it was starting to rely on the pattern more and more, though even in that game you'd see some worthwhile tweaks pop up. The game's 5th dungeon, the Palace of Winds, gives you the Rocks Cape, which lets you jump real high. At this point in the game, you have the Phantom Sword too. which creates clones of yourself on designated panels. Then you can control all of your clones at once to solve puzzles. The dungeon's boss is a pair of flying manta rays, and their fight combines both the cape and the sword to make a more exciting fight than if it focused on just one of the items. You have to use the cape to avoid obstacles and jump between the two manta rays. You strike the weak points of the blue ray while jumping over its tail. On the red ray, you use the sword to match your clones to the formation of the weak points and attack, all while avoiding projectiles that can take out your clones in one hit. It's not a super complicated fight, but it's infinitely more interesting than the red-blue dual boss setup that Ocarina's twin Rova did with the mirror shield. You aren't using the items in the most rudimentary way. You aren't sitting around waiting for your designated strike window to go attack. Like the Tiamat fight would later do in Darksiders, items in the Palace of Winds boss are treated as just another tool in your arsenal of moves. It's up to you to piece together how to combine them in the right way. The boss feels more like a little action puzzle, rather than a door with one weird, slow key. Even something as simple as changing the tool you use can do wonders for making a boss fight more interesting. Back to Ocarina we go, for the Forest Temple boss, Phantom Ganon. The Forest Temple is all about the bow, and during the boss fight, you're surrounded by paintings that Ganon will attack from. The game tries to fake you out with multiple copies of the painting to pay attention to and figure out which to quickly aim at the right time. But then the second phase of the fight starts, and it ditches the bow entirely. Instead, play magic energy tennis as you deflect Ganon's attack projectiles back and forth until he slips up. It's a change of pace, very fast paced compared to a lot of the other fights earlier in the game, and a clear and much needed break in the formula that had been pretty rigorously followed up until this point. There's a reason Phantom Ganon is one of the more well-liked boss fights in the game. But there is one game that completely shatters all parts of the Zelda pattern. No other game in the series breaks the mold more than Breath of the Wild. And that includes boss fights. The entire game is a trend away from the scripted sequence, favoring improvisation and clockwork systems over a defined answer. In Breath of the Wild, no boss is about the one key item. The Sheikah runes are all acquired at the start of the game, and are much more versatile than many of the items in the series past. The more traditional key items like the boomerang and bows are all consumable equipment, which forces the designers to not rely on players using one specific loadout. No boss has one single-minded solution, final boss notwithstanding. The bosses are way more open-ended in how you can fight them, using runes, arrows, deflecting attacks with a well-timed parry, using champion powers like Urbosa's Fury to stun them, using flurry rushes after dodging just right, using special weapons and gear to exploit their weakness, or just going up to the thing and wailing on it are all perfectly good ways to take down these bosses. And that flexibility ensures that no boss is dealt with in the same manner. Now, the boss fights aren't perfect, of course. They all have aesthetic or structural problems too, but at least these aren't the same structural problems. They don't fall into the same old routine that plagued the boss design in the games of the past. It still feels like Zelda, but no part of the game's boss design quite fits the old Zelda pattern. Zelda has tons more bosses that both exhibit and break the Zelda pattern. Head down to the comments and let us know of some other bosses that you've seen deviate from the Zelda pattern in interesting ways, either in Zelda or in other series. It's not easy to know exactly how to spice up a bland boss design, but by identifying some common patterns, it can make it easier to design a boss that breaks the mold.